Hello, my friends. You know what time it is. Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Corner podcast, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I'm, of course, your host, Harry Potvin, and today I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Danielle DiGrandi. Danielle is a rebel life coach who uses her previous experiences with drug and alcohol abuse to now help sober women reclaim their power, ignite their inner badass, and build a life of freedom, passion, and purpose. Danielle was so much fun to have on, and I really want to thank her again for coming on and having this discussion with me. Now, before we get into the episode today, guys, you know the drill. If you're listening, please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on that podcast platform. Share with someone who might want to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. I'll talk to y'all very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace. Good to go. Danielle, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's my pleasure.
So the first question that I ask everybody is kind of a big one, but What got you started on this journey of mental wellness?
Ooh. Well, it's always a loaded question, right? It's where do you start? In my opinion, we have all of these experiences in life that are like little tiny things that imprint on us. And over the course of time, we just kind of end up at a place where we look back at everything that's happened up until this point, like, oh, all of that happened for a reason. So my journey of mental wellness personally first started with myself. It came through, doing a lot of, following a lot of, I want to say what society tells us that we're supposed to do in life, and getting to a point in your life where you realize that maybe that's not working for you anymore. For most of my life, I had overcome and kind of dealt with a lot of my own personal mental health and wellness issues. And from what I knew at the time, it was just something that, that I just had to learn how to live with. And I never liked that option. I never liked just having to believe that something is just what it's going to be. So I don't know if you can relate to that. I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of like, this is just, it is what it is. So for myself personally, overcoming a lot of adversity, like I'm sure you and a lot of the people that listen to this can relate to, you start to get to a point where you start looking for a better way. For me, my mental health and wellness also, came with some other struggles that I dealt with when it came to addiction and alcoholism. And at the end of all this, I really had to take a look in the mirror and say, okay, well, you have the power to change this. You have the power to change this. And that's what led me down the path over the past 2.5+ years of really taking my mental health and wellness into my own hands and completely transforming my life in a way that I never thought possible.
I love that. So did anything in particular prompt that you looking in the mirror going like, I need to do something, I need to do this for me? Or was it kind of eventually your body was just like, let's get on with this?
Yeah. I am a big advocate of, like I said, agency over your life and your health and all of the things. For me, I went down the traditional path that when I was looking for, ways to cope with my mental health and wellness, ways to overcome, the adversity and the addiction, I followed a lot of the things that you would consider the normal way to treat things, especially in our health system. And so I had, gone down the route of pharmaceuticals. I'd gone down the route of therapy. I'd gone down the route of treatment when it came to addiction. And 10 years along that journey, multiple times cycling through this loop, I almost want to call it, this loop of still never finding lasting relief from what I was dealing with, I knew that I had to change something in that regards. And it wasn't until, I got to the point where I really was like, okay, it's up to you to change this. But it was really getting curious about like, why are all these things that are considered normal and the ways that you kind of put people into a box when treating symptoms, why have this not worked for me? And can there be other people that maybe can relate to this? And so for me, it was like an aha moment of it's time to do something different in your life. And then it was getting really curious on what other options were available that maybe weren't found in the traditional sense.
I love that because I mean, for me, I was never curious at the beginning. I was kind of just like, this works for people, so it'll work for me. And then when it doesn't, you're like, oh, I'm garbage. I'm a failure.
Oh, totally. You begin to think it's all about you, and then the shame builds up, right? The shame that builds up when it's not working, and you feel like the problem. And then I don't know if maybe in your experience, but for me, that led me even more inward and more with more shame and more, there must be something fundamentally wrong with me as a human being.
Yeah, 100%. When did those thoughts ever go away where you're like, oh, or there's something wrong with me fundamentally?
You know, when this started to become, and you know, this is a kind of a journey, right? So over the course of time, I'm going to say like 10 years is really when I was in this window of knowing that there was something that I needed to improve in my life. And I was constantly running into walls, right? I'd have short-term relief and then go back to old coping mechanisms and things wouldn't work, or, you know, so on and so forth. And, you know, it really came down to, it came down to the point where I knew that there had to be a better way.
Yeah. Man, I think, I guess this is a question that kept coming up in my mind when I was writing, but so often when you hear that people are struggling mentally, you know, it's better now, but for the last couple of years, the dialogue's been changing, but for the most part, people still have a hard time believing it every now and then, just because it's not really something you can see as someone from the outside looking in. For the most part, I mean, obviously, you know, you see symptoms and everything, but there's still that lack of belief. So as someone who's gone through it, like, how would you best describe it for people? Like, how would you best describe the impact physically that you felt when you were in that low place mentally?
Yeah, I would say in one word, and there's a lot of words to describe it, but I would say hopeless. That's what comes to mind when I think of that. You know, to piggyback on your last question that you asked that I don't think I fully answered, there was some really dark times, right? Some really dark times. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. For me, it was a point where it was life or death. I was like, I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to keep going on if this is how life is going to be. It was very black and white for me. I felt like all of the color in the world and the joy was muted out. And it was it was a really dark place. And like I said, once again, not only were the physical and, you know, mental symptoms there, but then the emotional symptoms that come with that, and the shame and the guilt and the feeling of, you know, what's wrong with me, and the feeling of, you know, not being able to show up as a productive member of society, and then feeling like you're behind on everything that we're supposed to be, whatever that means, right? In our society and in our culture of just like, you need to do more to be more. And if you can't function in society, then you're basically, you know, you're useless. And I felt like that. And so it was very much so when my mental health took a toll in the way that it did, it prevented me from being able to show up and work. It prevented me from being able to leave my house. And at that point, like I said, I mean, at that point, it kind of strips you away of the things that, like just basic human needs get stripped away. And then you're left with just this hopeless feeling that this will always be where you are because you've tried everything else and nothing's worked.
Yeah, you nailed it. That hopeless feeling is so, it makes you feel so empty because you're like, I literally have nothing to give anybody.
Yeah. You gotta love yourself first, right? And if you can't do that, then it's hard to love others. I mean, that's just how it is.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, did you ever talk to friends and family about what you were going through as you were going through it, or was that kind of like a topic afterwards as you were getting recovery?
Yeah, you know, obviously there's a huge stigma against mental health and wellness, and we're seeing obviously with everything that's happened with the pandemic and more people advocating for, you know, coming out and expressing, you know, really the things that they've gone through. We realize more nonetheless that mental health and wellness affects all of us. For me, growing up, I didn't notice it like starting to affect my life until my 20s, when it started like preventing me from being able to do things that were just things that I've always done. And so at first I was like, I had that suck it up mentality, right? Like suck it up, put on the face, go to work, do the thing. And slowly over time, I would find myself soothing with other coping mechanisms to that was the way I was able to regulate my nervous system and calm my mental health in that moment, right? And then we know when you pair those two together, right, the effects thereafter kind of compound, and then you're left with multiple things that need to be addressed in your life. I remember mentioning it to my family and to people, but it was still one of those things where I felt like I really had a guard up. I remember the first time that I was proactive about seeking treatment. I was living in New York City, and I made an appointment with a doctor, and I was super scared because I was like, I'm going to have to, put on a good face and answer these questions and try to be, normal and put together. And I just remember walking in this big stuffy doctor's room and sitting down with this doctor, and, asked me like 3 questions and wrote me 3 prescriptions, and I was on my way. And I was like, I felt so like disregarded and so shameful of that experience too. And that's kind of like where it started, but I just have that vivid memory of that. And at that time, people weren't really like, it's not like it is today. Nobody was talking, there wasn't like mental health and support groups, right? And so it's just like, okay, now I have the things to fix the symptoms. I'm going to go back to life per se.
Yeah. Oh, I had a story similar. I think I shared it with you off camera about medication, but man, when that happens and they just write it, the thing you just mentioned it, the 3 questions they ask, it's not even like they dove into, okay, what's causing this? It's like, oh no, you're broken. Here's some tape.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember it's like, here's these prescriptions. There's nothing about the actual like layers underneath, right? There's more to a person than just the things, the symptoms that they say that they have. And it's what's the most interesting to me about the treatments of mental health is how we are so quick to just, assume that this, without looking at the rest of the mind, body, the connection, everything. And it was like, okay, here you go. You're going to feel really terrible for a while. And if it doesn't work, come back. We'll fix your medication. You can keep, and it was like that song and dance. I was in and out trying all these different things and just always felt like I was kind of flatlined. And we can probably talk about it more, but I never really got the relief that I was hoping that I'd get from that.
Yeah. Did you ever get misdiagnosed?
I don't think so. I'm not sure, but I can see that happening very easily, right? When we go in to do assessments for mental health, it's the one assessment where we don't look at any other part of the body, right? Or the brain. We don't look at the actual brain. We just use our words and say, this is what's happening. And then we get classified into a thing. So I've never been personally misdiagnosed. I do not believe, but who's to say, right? Who's to say that that's the case, and that doesn't happen for many people? Is that your experience?
Only once, and it wasn't that big of a deal, but I was told that I was an addict, like substance addiction, and I was like, no, I'm not. I think I would know. And it wasn't, it was no big deal at the end, because it was a weird experience, because the doctor told me that, and I was like, no, and they're like, oh, okay, maybe you're right. I'm like, why would you even tell me that? Why would you even tell me that?
That's interesting. Yeah, I do remember, I've had a similar experience though, where I went into this is a couple years later, to another doctor when I had moved. And at the time I not only was dealing with mental health, but I was also like coming to terms with the fact that like I might have a problem with alcohol. And one of the things that they recommended was a certain medication to help curb alcohol cravings, which we know that's not true, but it was just interesting to see like, oh, here's another thing and to take on top of that. And this should give you reprieve with your cravings to drink. And I was like, I don't know about that, but it was just interesting. It was a really interesting thing as well that I just remembered as we're talking.
There's always one pill that works, isn't there?
The magic pill. Now, let me know when they come out with that.
That'd be great. Yeah, maybe Pfizer will come out with one or something. On the topic of pills, when you were on what was your experience with antidepressants? Like, did you have a negative reaction the first time?
Oh yeah, I had a terrible reaction. I've taken most of the ones that you can probably, identify with. And there was periods in my life when I was in like healthier condition, when I wasn't drinking. We know that you're not supposed to drink and take prescription medications, right? But most of the world does consume alcohol. And so for, that definitely was like something that I think, might have had a little bit of an influence on maybe them not working, but I never felt necessarily great. I remember feeling horrible, feeling really terrible. And there was just a brief period of time where I felt like they worked. And then other than that, I felt maybe a little bit better, but I definitely felt numb.
Right. Numb.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the flatlining came with that as well then? That's what it felt like?
Yeah.
Now, did you ever bring that up with your doctor?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Because for me, I got the same thing. I felt numb and my brain felt flatlined. And I was so hesitant to go to my doctor because I was like, it'll work eventually.
Right. And they tell you it will. They tell you that you're supposed to just deal with that. And that's another thing that I just didn't like. I didn't like the fact that, like I said, from what I know to this day to what I knew then, right? I was 100% listening to somebody else's advice and believing it wholeheartedly that this was another thing that if I couldn't just get right, then there was something wrong with me.
Yeah. So when did you stop taking the antidepressants, or do you still take them?
I do not. No, I do not. So, I've been sober from drugs and alcohol from 2 years and 7 months. The last time that I went to treatment, up until that point, I had taken prescription medication. And then when I was in treatment, once again, I met with a doctor who wrote me my prescriptions. When I got out, I learned a lot more, in the early stages of recovery, just about the mind, the body, the connection between the two. And when I got out, I was like, I'm going to try this other direction. And if this other direction doesn't work, then I have my prescription medication and I can go back to that. And it was at that point in time that I remember having those bottles. And then I remember making the commitment to myself that, no matter what, there was always another route I could take. I ended up never having to take a single prescription medication ever again to this day. And that was, kind of a total different approach than what I had done in the past. But it was really taking into account, all aspects of mental, physical wellness in a holistic manner, focusing on the mind-body connection and bringing in exercise and changing my eating habits that really gave me, reprieve once and for all.
I feel like that the mind-gut connection often gets overlooked when we're talking about mental wellness because, well, I mean, for me anyway, when I first started learning about the mind-gut, I was like, what? I thought the brain was its own organ that operated alone. Because you've done obviously the research and the work, like how does that mind-gut connection even work for people?
Yeah, great question. I think that luckily with emerging science, right, what they know about the gut is still evolving and we're learning a lot more. But yeah, I mean, when you think of the word mental health, right, you think of the brain. Most people think of the brain. That's the first thing that comes to mind. And normally with an SSRI or something else, we're treating the brain, right? We're treating the brain to produce more of the neurotransmitters and chemicals to balance out the serotonin, the dopamine, all of the things to relieve the anxiety and depression. And one of the biggest things that we're seeing now is that the gut actually produces more serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, norepinephrine. These are the chemicals that make you happy, that make you motivated, that make you feel connected, like connectivity and love, that help you relax. We're seeing that they produce more in the gut than they do in the brain. So not to say that sometimes like people might need to take a route of prescription medication for a little bit, and there's nothing wrong with that. But one of the things that that I learned that blew my mind is that frontline therapies in some of the other countries are not pharmaceuticals, right? They take a look at, is there a way to balance out your body in a more holistic manner before the medications? And I'm sure that, you know, you and I, if we were ever given that option, we might have said, yeah, I'll give that a try first. And so what I like about the emerging science behind gut health is it kind of looks at the individual and says, okay, if we treat your gut and we can produce more of those chemicals to balance out the brain, since they are produced there, and you can get ahead of some of these feelings, then that can be another option as well. And so I could geek out on the science all day, but it's just really cool to see like the direction that this is going in, and to see for someone like myself, that this is something that actually works. So I definitely encourage anyone to, like really open your mind to it, because at first it might sound a little crazy. You're like, that sounds like absolute nonsense. I don't believe it. What are you talking about? Why is it my doctor said that? And once again, it comes back to that, like educating yourself, agency over your health in your life, and then learning more about your body, your brain. Yeah.
I did not know that about the gut.
Yeah.
That's if you don't know anything about that connection, you hear that, like the serotonin thing, immediately my brain goes, no.
Yeah, you're like, that's bullshit.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good books on this, but it's completely true. And that's why we see, right? Like you think of the connection when you talk to someone that has anxiety or depression, right? There's also normally physical symptoms that come with that. Sometimes there's a lot of pain, poor sleep, lack of energy, lack of motivation to do something. And you really start to think about that, like, okay, right, that really makes a lot of sense. And then if you tune into your body enough, you can start to really see, like when I get that gut feeling, right? When I get this sense of, or the butterflies in my stomach, and it's like, and it triggers those emotions in my body and my brain. It's like, we can really see like they're so much more connected through the vagus nerve than we ever knew. And so optimizing your gut helps with better mental wellness. And that comes with, there's different modalities you can do, but it's really cool and really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, let's geek out for a little bit because I'm very interested in this. How do you activate those, like that serotonin from the gut? Like, do you give it food that it likes? Like, I don't even know what works.
So we have more, you have more gut bacteria. Basically, you're made up of all bacteria. You're 1% human. So that's it. That's my TED Talk. Thank you for coming.
Oh, what the fuck? No, okay. Yeah, okay.
So we're all like living, we have a bunch of organisms, a bunch of bacteria in our bodies. And when we have an offset of those bacteria in our bodies, and that could come from, antibiotics as a child, lots of them, the foods that you've eaten for a long period of time, not taking care of your physical health, medications over a long course when they were intended for a short, right? That kind of weaken the immune system and fight off your body's ability to really be resilient and fire on all cylinders, we'll call it. So your gut, right? So if there's 100 trillion bacteria in your gut, and you feel symptoms, say you're like, okay, well, I have anxiety and depression. I can feel a little bit like I can classify myself in that area, but I also like, I can't concentrate. I feel like I have brain fog. I'm walking around in a cloud. I have really bad digestive issues. Like there's all these things that when I talk to somebody that's like, that I'm listening to the things that they're dealing with, it normally comes down to those things, right? Low energy, lack of sleep. And so what normally happens is that it's a dysbiosis in your gut. So there is the population of good bacteria are overpowered by the population of bad bacteria. And so you can do what's called an intervention where you kill off the bad gut bacteria. These are normally the ones that are signaling to your brain, like eat more sugar, eat lots of junk food. You can do an intervention, and that comes through taking certain strains of prebiotics, probiotics, phytobiotics, and psychobiotics, which we can talk about, but also eating for optimal mental wellness, moving your body regularly, getting proper sleep, and of course, just managing the stress levels of everyday life. And so it's kind of this component, this wheel of of the things that you can do to help that, but then also the intervention of the body as well.
What is a psychobiotic?
Yes, and God, yes. So psychobiotics are new strains of probiotics that are specifically formulated for, because for example, right, if somebody said, I drink kombucha and I take a probiotic, that's my gut health and regimen. And what most people don't know is you have to match the strain to the species. So if you're taking a strain, a probiotic strain, and it's a strain for, anything you can think of it's not the strain that you're looking for, then basically that it won't treat what you're wanting. So you're wanting to make sure out of the thousands of strains of probiotics that you're getting the right ones to help with the symptoms that you're looking for. So psychobiotics are a new strain of probiotics specifically designed to help with anxiety, depression, and stress.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And when did those get introduced?
So those have been, so a lot of this has come out of the Gut Microbiome Project out of UCLA. So that's where a lot of this emerging science is from. There is a really incredible doctor, I believe his name is Dr. Emran Mayer, who does a lot of books on the gut microbiome, but this is all emerging new science. And so this is within the last 3 to 5 years that we're seeing this information come out. We've known all about the gut for a really long time, but now we're seeing the emergence of new things to actually correlate mental wellness as well, which is really cool. So
it almost feels like a disservice when people think that just a happy pill is going to work on everything. I feel like the human body and mind is just way too complex for that.
Well, it's very like specific, right? I mean, me and you are completely different in the way that our makeup and our build and the types of things that we have in our body, we're a little bit different. So if we just treat, you and me the same, then we're not looking at like the actual person and everything, the history, the diet, the health, all of the things that make you an individual, right? So that's one of the things that for me was the biggest aha is, and I'll be completely honest with you, it's like, sometimes I question whether or not a diagnosis that you get from a doctor is 100% accurate, right? Could it be based on, there's times where it can be, but how many people, and like you said, have been misdiagnosed and then end up on something for a short term, and maybe they take it for a long term. And then I'm sure you probably have heard, people that have been on something for a long time and then coming off of that is almost equally as hard in its own sense for the body as well and the mind.
Oh yeah. That it happened to my grandma.
Yeah.
She went right off medication. She had been on it for like 20 years, and
yes,
it's like I think what she said, she was like, it's scary how impactful it felt, like how dependent your brain gets on it.
Yeah.
Without you even knowing, because you just take the pill and it's like, whatever, it's making me better. But
yeah, I have a lot of people that I know that that's happened to, right? And it's unfortunate. And sometimes the things to treat that after that symptom is just another thing that doesn't work, and it almost becomes this cycle that you get stuck in, of trading one thing for the other, and the long-term side effects sometimes are, well, in most sense, the long-term side effects are not always the best.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Yeah, it's this is so interesting. I'm very interested in this whole gut thing.
Yeah.
Because because when I feel really anxious, my gut hurts, honestly.
Right, and your digestion and your stomach, and you can't sleep. Like I'll tell you my experience. When I heard this, I was like, okay, well, at this point in my life, I'm willing to try anything. Like, what am I going to lose?
Right.
I had no intentions of this actually working, right? I mean, this is what we'll call like a not too happy time in my life. We'll just say that. And it was the time kind of similar to when you asked me what was the moment that you were like, I need to do something about it. It was this time. And I knew that I had taken a toll on my body and I had taken a toll on my mind. And I had thought that I had done some irreversible damages to my body, but I was like, I'm willing to try something. So I started taking, some of these targeted supplements for the gut-brain axis. And I was like, okay, we'll see. And within, I'm going to say within 90 days, it felt like, I always say it's like a light turned on. I felt like kind of that instance that I told you, like the black and white and the color aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like the cloud that I had been walking in had been alleviated and I could finally see again. And over the course of time, right? Because this is not instant gratification. This is root level healing. It's going to be different for everyone. It takes a little bit of time for your body to start functioning like a well-oiled machine. But I feel better to this day than I had to or have in my entire life. And it feels like no other word that I can say besides like optimal, like the optimal wellness, what you think about when you think of having the mental, physical, and emotional health all in balance. And it was something that it drastically changed my life. And to this day, I still wonder where I would have been if I didn't learn about this. And I still continue down the route that I knew was the route that I was, normally used to taking. I don't think I would have had half of the things happen in my life because I wasn't feeling well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so like take the risks is basically what you're saying.
Take the risks, yeah. Take the risks, learn about it, and be willing to try new things. I think that's a big thing for us is we've all been kind of jaded with so many things over the past couple of years. It's like I can't even listen to anything else. But I look at science. I follow science, and if science is pointing me in the direction that I can try this, I don't think anyone has anything to lose by trying this route. Especially because we're starting, anywhere you go nowadays, you'll see some kind of article or magazine cover or something that talks about, all of the ways that pretty much we've known like all of our lives that really help us, right? Like back from hundreds of thousands of years ago, we have these kind of ancient medicines and herbs and practices that we're seeing kind of do a 180 and come back. And it's like the mindfulness and all the things. And so, I think there's something to that. And I think with the advances in science, kind of taking those old traditional methods that have worked, that's kind of how we get ahead of things. And so I definitely think it's, from my experience, it was game changer for sure.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah. I hope we get to a point where that's more widely accepted, because still it's accepted now, but it's not discussed very often. I had a herbalist come on talking about the types of herbs that impact your mental health, and I was like, what, a plant?
Oh yeah, it's all plant-based. It's ashwagandha, it's all these different herbs, right? And so what I'm talking about as well is everything that that worked for me was a holistic plant-based. And once again, that sounds absolutely crazy, right? Like you're talking about a chemical imbalance. It sounds totally nuts. But we're seeing that emerging and coming back. And so there's something to it. 100%.
Yeah, definitely. Now, in your experience, like with talking to people and doing the work that you do, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions when it comes to like stress management and like mental wellness management?
That you can manage all of these things if you just do more yoga and meditation. I think that's a big lie, because what it is, at 9 times out of 10, why people can't focus, it's because they have a dysregulated nervous system. And a dysregulated nervous system goes down to what we're talking about with the vagus nerve and the mind-gut connection. So if you can't regulate your body internally and have your body then you can do all the yoga in the world and it's not going to work. But part of that is also eating for optimal mental wellness, right? So if you're fueling your body with, with the wrong foods, or you're getting not enough sleep, then you can't get ahead of some of these things. So I think I see a lot of people, they're like, but I do my morning routine and I meditate and I do yoga and I eat pretty healthy. And a lot of times it's not a huge shift that they have to make, but they do have to do something internally. And that's kind of what I'm talking about with that root level healing, that once you get your body balanced out, it's like that marker moment of complete change for somebody.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. That's the thing, is that sometimes it's just a little change and you're like, why didn't I even try this before?
Yeah.
It's like the little, yeah, that's a great misconception, because that is so funny that you said that about yoga and meditation, because yeah, that happened
it's
to
part
me.
of it. It's part of it, but it's not the cure, right? It's like
Right.
you can't just do these surface level, quick fixes in order to, when you're repairing something inside the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Now, on the same note, like how can people at home start to develop like a growth mindset? I know you mentioned that a lot. Well, like how do you start to develop that?
Yeah, I think it's a choice. I think everything's just a decision. You make a decision whether or not you want to change. And I know that sounds crazy, but most of the time, it comes down to making a decision that this disrupts a little bit of your everyday life, so that you're not in a continuous loop of repetition. And I always recommend people start really small, right? They make a decision and then they start with a small action. And a small action can be, doing something different for yourself, right? Instead of watching the same news channel, you need to go for a walk instead, right? Instead of, not eating your dinner, of being healthy, or try making something the night before. It's like all of these things for a growth mindset. It's just do something different for yourself. Do something different and be open to not thinking that everything is right. Be open to thinking that there's possibilities that you could learn something. So listening, learning, educating yourself, trying new things, and breaking the continuous loop that keeps you stuck by
Right.
taking small actionable steps.
Right. A lot of us are in that loop right now.
Oh, I know. No, I not to say that I haven't been either. And I know when I'm in that loop, because when I'm in that loop, I feel terrible, right? I feel terrible. I'm stressed. I feel burnt out. I feel I don't eat properly. I don't get enough sleep. It's like that loop, I'll notice when I'm in it, because the things that I need to do for myself first, right? And the things that you need to do for yourself first before anything else comes in the world, right? We have to fill our own cup. And when those things start to get pushed to the side is normally when you're like, something's out of balance, right? We try to always look at our lives in a wheel, right? Like what's getting the least attention? And that's normally what needs to be the most nurtured.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people, especially in Ontario right now, are feeling that
Yeah.
hard. Like it's almost impossible to avoid the news and well, I mean, we're in lockdown again, so it's
Yeah.
hard to avoid that. But yeah, it's an interesting time, because this is probably the most important time to practice proper stress management,
Mm-hmm.
and no one knows how to do it.
Yeah, I think it's another thing getting curious, I to know what it's like to be in lockdown. Now I'm not in the same sense that all of you are there, but I know that feeling, right? When you can't leave and you can't do the things that you want to do, you feel like you're trapped. And I think something that you're doing is a great thing to show other people, right? Like, where can you connect with other humans, cultivate some type of hope, connectivity, like things like this, maybe take a look at some of the things that you've always wanted to do, and maybe, start exploring them. And yeah, I know that's easier said than done, but I think what you've developed during COVID with this, everything that you're doing is amazing. So
Oh, thank you.
yeah.
Don't gas me up, please. No, but it is true. I think that's been a reoccurring mentioned thing from a couple guests recently on
Yeah.
the show, is like, you know, find one little thing every day that pushes you or makes you want to get out of bed. Because I mean, I've had it too. When that new lockdown announcement came on, and most Ontario people can relate to this,
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave bed. I was like, oh, I'm gonna crawl into a hole and never come out, because that seems like the least stressful thing I can do right now.
Yeah.
But finding that one thing, like, you need it. You need to keep going. Human beings, we're like sharks when they swim in the water. Sharks can't stop swimming because they die.
Yeah.
It's kind of like humans. We can't stop doing everything.
Yeah. I know. And then we have to actually like sit with our feelings, and that's a whole nother thing. Just start small, right? Start small, whether you do, pick up a new like thing that you do, try maybe some kind of exercise you never did, do a 30-day yoga challenge, cultivate a space in your house. It's a safe space, like a Zen place. That's something that I did that really helped. And yeah, now is the perfect time to, start learning about new things. I know for me, this was when when COVID hit is when I started to dive deeper into learning more about how I could withhold this and withstand this and become resilient, when I wasn't able to leave my house. And through that education and through learning and through being curious, I started both of my businesses during that time. And it was just a way for me to be like, okay, well, what does the world need right now? What can I do and how can I serve? And that kept me going. It gave me hope in that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hope's all we can have, man. Yeah. I say that all the time. Especially when the lockdown hit, I was like, I'm hopeful. I mean, I can't really offer anything else. I don't know.
I'll move some furniture around in my house.
Yeah, cry while I do it or something. Yeah. For people listening, like, I'm sorry for this, but in one sentence, like, how can you, like, in one sentence, how can you give people? No, how am I going to word this?
Uh-oh.
How can people start to develop a sense of hope, or like maybe even find a way to regulate the stress that they're experiencing right now? Forget the sentence thing I said. I don't know why I said that.
Okay. I've got a couple things.
Let's do it.
I think now more than ever is the time to connect to people that you love and care about. Set up a routine to help regulate your nervous system. Maybe you need to call your mom more, right? Set up a time where you talk to the people that you love on a schedule that gives you something to both look forward to. That was something that really helped me too. Find one thing that you can do that can help you move in this time, right? Whether it's doing something low key, whether it's taking a walk outside, you can do that, right? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you'll freeze, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe not the walk outside, but if you know what I'm saying, something, and give yourself, instead of setting 30-day goals are not what you need to be setting right now. Just give yourself little tiny things where you can set up some type of schedule to keep you somewhere on track, that you can start to cultivate healthy habits while you're in this time. I really think movement is one of the best things we can do for our mental health as well. And it doesn't have to be something crazy. And then right now, more than ever, just nourishing yourself with the foods that you eat, really, really making sure that you're eating high quality food to help with your mental wellness. Those are kind of my tips, and sleep as much as you need to.
Yeah, no, seriously. Yeah, man, no, it's all great points. And I think on that topic, my last question for you, Danielle, there's been a lot of stats coming out recently about, all sorts of areas in mental health. I just read one where it said, I have it right here, but the University of Michigan Medical School said that in the first 12 months of the pandemic, this isn't even currently, but in the first 12 months, the number of hospital admissions from adolescents with eating disorders more than doubled. And then another stat I just read was 17%, I believe, of teenagers and young adults are considering suicide right now, because it's there's no hope for anybody. So what would you, if you were in a room with these people who are experiencing all these different types of, challenges and kind of this lost sense of meaning, what would you want to tell them?
So with what you're talking about of the deaths of despair that have happened, that we've seen uprise through COVID, right? Suicide rates, drug addiction, mental health, all of these things, it's more so than ever. It's not just thinking that mental health is for you and me, it's also for children, and that there is just as much a way to start a child that is dealing with mental health issues on the same route of healing through the gut-brain axis as you or I would if we started down this route. So once again, I think that it's very important, especially for children, in this really kind of confusing time, to learn about this as well, for everyone to educate themselves with this. Yeah, it's one of these things that, once again, most people don't know about, but it's available to us all. So that's my thing, is it's definitely educate yourself. And then, yeah, I mean, this is a really hard thing. How do you tell, a child that's going through all this, that this is going to change? And I think now more than ever, it's important for us to set examples and talk about this, and really continue to do the work that we're doing to let people know that they're not alone.
Yeah, that's so important, especially because when I'm coaching, the last swim practice I had before we locked down again, it was dead quiet. They're usually like screaming and cheering, and you just feel for them, because it's like, how do you, like you said, how do you tell them that it'll be okay? Man.
It's changed forever. I mean, it's definitely not an easy time as a child right now, but like I said, I think it's now more than ever, we can use our story, we can use our voice, we can do all the things that we can to help people, because in turn, that also, the law of reciprocity, right? We help someone else, that helps us, and just lending a helping hand to anyone right now, I think, is something we have control over.
Yeah, 100%. Now, where can my listeners find you for any of the cool stuff that you've mentioned today?
Yes. So most of the stuff that I post is going to be over on Instagram. You can follow me at the Danielle DiGrandi. You can click my link tree. You can learn more about some of the stuff that we talked about with the gut brain axis. You can learn how to contact me directly if you have any questions. That would be the best place over there.
Awesome. And I'll put that link down below. Danielle, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure.
So nice to be on. I appreciate you so much. And thank you everyone for listening. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you guys. I'm just going to end it there. Have a good day.